U.S. History B Virtual Interactive Notebook 3, Day 3. This is Cold War Part 2. So the essential question today is, how did tension increase in the early years of the Cold War? The main idea is Cold War II. The subtopics are containment, domino theory, and the Iron Curtain. Go ahead and set that up. For containment, in 1946, a U.S. official who had gone to the Soviet Union sent back an 8,000-page memo and told the Truman administration, what the Soviets were thinking. And what they were thinking was they would have to destroy their enemies, or their enemies would destroy them. And they viewed their enemies as the West, or us, the United States and Western Europe. Western Europe being France, Britain, and now Germany, West Germany. So this official recommended that the government contain communism where it already was. Don't let it spread. This became known as the containment policy. The Soviet doctrine was that communism would be spread through violent revolution across the world until the entire world was Soviet. And containment was an attempt to curtail that. Domino theory. President Eisenhower, he was the commanding general in Europe during World War II. When he was elected, he and his advisors came up with what they called the domino theory. And the domino theory was that if one country was allowed to turn communist, the countries around it would turn communist. For example, North Korea was communist, and they were worried that South Korea would become communist. And in fact, North Korea invaded South Korea and tried to make it communist. So I guess it was supported there. In Vietnam, they were worried that if North Vietnam was allowed to turn South Vietnam communist, then all the countries around it would turn communist. And that actually happened. North Vietnam did turn South Vietnam communist, and you'd see communism in Cambodia after that, not in Thailand. So who knows? But the domino theory was Eisenhower's theory that if one country was allowed to go communist, the countries around it would also go communist. And finally, the Iron Curtain. Winston Churchill was the Britain's hero of World War II. But after World War II, he was really tough on communism, and the British people seemed to be pretty concerned that he was going to start World War III immediately after World War II with the Soviets. So they voted him out. And then they would vote him back in later, believe it or not. But while he was voted out, he went on a tour, and he came to the United States as part of his tour and gave a speech. And he called the dividing line between the communist east of Europe and what he called the free west. He called the dividing line between the two the Iron Curtain. Now, your book, when it says that Churchill said the West is free, they put the word free in quotes for ironic emphasis, or to point out that maybe it's arguable that Western Europe was free. Well, I'll tell you one thing you could do in Western Europe. You could leave it without being shot. But in Eastern Europe, after World War II, Stalin, when he invaded Germany, his armies crossed through Eastern European countries, like what we called Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Poland. And after World War II, they just stayed there. And then he staged fake elections and said, they all voted to be communist. Well, that's not what would have happened if they had free elections, particularly in Poland. Poland didn't want to be communist. But Stalin shot them until they were communist. So the idea that if you're comparing Western Europe's freedom to Eastern Europe's freedom, the idea that you would put that in ironic emphasis, I have a real issue with that. I think it was probably way better to be in Western Europe than Eastern Europe at this time. That's why so many people risk getting shot to sneak across the border. But anyway, Churchill said that an Iron Curtain divided Eastern and Western Europe, and that Iron Curtain essentially kept the freedom from seeping into Eastern Europe. So for your output today, I want you to find a map of Cold War Europe on Google and just sketch the outlines of the capitalist West and the communist East, but don't do the country boundaries. So I don't need you to sketch out where Spain is and then write the word Spain. Although Spain wasn't really free at this time. Spain was still under a fascist dictator named Franco, and would be till 1975. So that's a bad example. Don't sketch out France, right? And then write France. Just this blob is Western Europe and this blob is Eastern Europe. That's what I want you to do. All right, and I will see you tomorrow for day 4. Thank you.